Hello, welcome to another inspiring video on our channel. Today we will dive into a biblical story filled with intrigue, power, and divine consequences. Get ready to learn about the shocking fate of one of the most controversial figures in the Old Testament. This story will show us how God's justice can reach even the most powerful. Are you ready for this journey? So, let's get started. The story starts in the turbulent times of the Kingdom of Israel. Around the 9th century BC, the kingdom was divided, with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. On the throne of Israel sat King Ahab, known for his moral weakness and tendency to be influenced. But behind the throne, an even more influential and feared figure wielded her power, Queen Jezebel. Jezebel was not an Israelite by birth. She was the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidon, a prosperous Phoenician city known for its maritime trade and, unfortunately, for its fervent worship of Baal and Asherah. When Jezebel married Ahab, she not only brought her exotic beauty and political cunning, but also her deeply rooted pagan beliefs. From the beginning of her reign, Jezebel demonstrated a fierce determination to transform Israel. She did not see her role as that of a passive queen consort, but as an active reformer determined to shape the kingdom in her own image. With Ahab's complacency, she began to introduce Baal worship on an unprecedented scale. Luxurious temples were erected in honor of Baal, with polished stone altars and imposing statues. Jezebel brought with her 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, supporting them with resources from the royal treasury. These false prophets gained prominence at court, while the true prophets of Yahweh, the God of Israel, were systematically persecuted and eliminated. The transformation of Israel under Jezebel's rule was dramatic and disturbing. Traditional religious practices were suppressed, and those who remained faithful to the God of their ancestors were forced into hiding. The land, once blessed by the covenant with Yahweh, now suffered from prolonged droughts and devastating famines, a clear sign of God's displeasure. Among the prophets who dared to oppose Jezebel was Elijah the Tishbite. This man of God, known for his rugged appearance and fiery zeal, became Jezebel's main antagonist. Elijah did not fear confronting royal power, and his prophecies and miracles were a constant reminder of the true God's power. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel was a turning point. In front of all the people, Elijah challenged the 450 prophets of Baal to a divine test. 2 altars were prepared, one for Baal and one for Yahweh. The God who answered with fire, consuming the sacrifice, would be recognized as the true God. The prophets of Baal spent hours shouting, dancing, and even mutilating themselves, begging their God to respond. But the sky remained silent. When it was Elijah's turn, he not only prepared the altar but drenched it with water, making the task seemingly impossible. With a simple prayer, fire descended from heaven, consuming not only the sacrifice but also the stones of the altar and the water around it. This spectacular event should have marked the end of Jezebel's reign and the restoration of the worship of Yahweh. However, the queen proved to be relentless. Far from repenting, she vowed revenge against Elijah, forcing him to flee into the desert. The following years saw Jezebel consolidate her power even further. She continued to use her influence to shape the kingdom's politics. One of the most famous episodes of her reign was the case of Naboth's vineyard. When Ahab desired the vineyard of a man named Naboth, but Naboth refused to sell it, Jezebel orchestrated a wicked plan. She wrote letters in the king's name, ordering false witnesses to accuse Naboth of blasphemy. The plan worked perfectly. Naboth was stoned to death, and Ahab took possession of the vineyard. This act of injustice demonstrated how far Jezebel was willing to go to achieve her goals. But the eyes of the Lord were upon Jezebel, and his justice would not delay. After Ahab's death in battle, their son Joram took the throne. Jezebel continued to wield her influence as queen mother. However, the prophet Elisha, Elijah's successor, received the Lord's command to anoint Jehu as the new king of Israel. Jehu was no ordinary man. Known for his furious chariot driving and his ardent zeal, he was chosen as the instrument of divine vengeance against the house of Ahab, and particularly against Jezebel. God's plan was in motion, and the fate of the wicked queen was sealed. Driven by a divine mission, Jehu marched toward Jezreel, where Jezebel resided. News of his approach reached the queen's ears. What do you think went through Jezebel's mind at that moment? Did she feel fear, regret, or did she maintain her arrogance until the end? Surprisingly, Jezebel did not try to flee. Instead, she prepared to face Jehu with all the dignity of a queen. With meticulous care, Jezebel painted her eyes with kohl, a popular cosmetic of the time, arranged her hair in an elaborate hairstyle, and adorned herself with her finest jewelry. It was as if she was preparing for a final battle, using her beauty and status as weapons. Positioning herself at the high window of the palace, Jezebel awaited Jehu's arrival. When Jehu entered the city gates riding his chariot, Jezebel saw him from the palace window. With a voice laden with contempt, she shouted, "Traitor! Do you come in peace after killing your king?" Jehu, however, was not intimidated by Jezebel's words. He looked up toward the window and shouted, "Who is on my side? Who?" His thunderous voice echoed through the palace courtyard. At this critical moment, the eunuchs who served Jezebel had to make a choice. For years, they had witnessed the queen's excesses and cruelty. Now, in the face of a new authority that seemed to have divine favor, they hesitated. They looked at Jezebel, then at Jehu, and within seconds, they made their decision. 2 or 3 eunuchs leaned out of the window, looking down at Jehu. The new king, seeing their hesitation turn to complicity, shouted, "Throw her down!" Without a moment's hesitation, the servants seized Jezebel. The queen, realizing the betrayal too late, must have struggled, but it was in vain. With a violent shove, Jezebel's body was hurled from the window. Time seemed to slow as she fell. Her screams were cut short by the sound of impact as her body hit the paved ground below. The blood of the once powerful queen splattered the palace walls and Jehu's horses. The fall was not just physical, but symbolized the dramatic end of an era of wickedness and idolatry in Israel. But the story does not end here. Jezebel's fate after her fall is perhaps the most shocking and disturbing aspect of this account. Jehu, seemingly indifferent to what had just happened, entered the palace. He sat down to eat and drink, celebrating his victory and the fulfillment of prophecy, while Jezebel's body lay abandoned in the courtyard. Only after he was satisfied did Jehu remember Jezebel. Perhaps touched by a bit of pity or simply wanting to close the matter, he ordered that her body be buried. "Bury this cursed woman," he said, "for she was a king's daughter." But when the servants went to collect the body for burial, they found a horrific scene. All that remained of Jezebel were her skull, feet, and the palms of her hands. The rest of her body had been devoured by the wild dogs that roamed the city, just as the prophet Elijah had predicted years before. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. This grotesque scene serves as a powerful reminder of divine judgment. Jezebel, who once dressed in the finest purple and linen, who wore gold and precious jewels, was now unrecognizable, her body serving as food for stray dogs. The woman who defied God and persecuted his prophets met a terrible and humiliating end, a vivid testimony to the consequences of rebellion against God. Jezebel's death marked the end of a dark era for Israel. With her downfall, the altars of Baal were destroyed, the false prophets were eliminated, and the worship of the true God was gradually restored. The people, long oppressed and led astray, now had the opportunity to return to the ways of the Lord. Let's take a moment to reflect. How does this story affect us today? What lessons can we draw from Jezebel's tragic fate? First, we see that earthly power and wealth are fleeting. Jezebel enjoyed authority and luxury for many years, but in the end, none of that protected her from divine judgment. Secondly, Jezebel's story shows us the terrible consequences of idolatry and rebellion against God. By promoting false gods and persecuting the faithful, Jezebel not only harmed herself, but also led many others into sin. Another important lesson is about repentance. Until her last moments, Jezebel remained stubborn in her wickedness. We see no sign of remorse or desire for change in her. Jezebel's story teaches us that God's justice prevails. Although it may sometimes seem that the wicked prosper, we must trust that God sees all things and that in due time He will act. Our part is to remain faithful and confident, even in the face of adversity. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If this message touched your heart, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the next video that will appear on the screen. May God richly bless you.